Needless Things Podcast. Hey, Phantomaniacs, welcome to the newest episode of the Needless Things Podcast, where we talk about toys, movies, music, and all manner of pop culture dorkery. I am your host, Dave, and I think I pretty frequently make the claim that I'm busy, and it's usually true. I think it's always true. I've always got something going on. But this time, you guys, I'm really, really busy. We just recorded the 200th episode of the Needless Things Podcast live at the In-Town Coffee House. If you missed it, I'm sorry. You missed a tremendous event that came off far better than I ever could have imagined. So many people came together to create something so special that as long as I live, it's going to be one of the proudest moments of my entire life. So many special people came together and just worked really hard, and it was amazing, and I'm so proud of what we accomplished and how well we accomplished it. Now, if you weren't there, and most of you weren't, you can hear the show not this next week, but the week after that, because that's the 200th episode. And I will also be posting the video that our pal Wilson, who filmed the Troublemaker documentary that will be coming out sometime this year, he came out and he filmed the 200th, and I have seen his cut of what we filmed, and it requires very little work to make it publishable, releasable, I don't know, whatever. And it's going to be released in video format somewhere. Maybe YouTube, maybe Vimeo, I don't know, one of those places. So not only 2 weeks from now will you be able to hear the 200th episode, but there will also be a full video episode type thing, full production. Pardon me, I had to take a little swig of water there. I'm a little dried out. I'm a little tired. It's 4:45 in the morning here in the Phantom Zone, which I am halfway considering renaming Westworld, now that I've come out of the mask closet or whatever. But I'm a little dried up. I've been working hard, you guys, but 200 is 2 weeks away, and it was amazing, and I'm very excited for you guys to hear it and to see it. Today's episode is the second part of me and Mr. Beau Brown's far-ranging conversation about Masters of the Universe. Now, the first one, we went a little far afield of the topic, but mostly discussed the 2017 toy line, toy releases, rather. In this episode, we get a little wacky, you guys. We talk about all kinds of things, not all of which are Masters of the Universe. I go off on some tangents. Beau humors me. It's one of the most free-form episodes of the Needless Things podcast that has been recorded to date, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. And I'll be honest with you, this would not have been a bad 200th episode. If everything had fallen through with the live show, which fortunately, not only did it not fall through, it came off spectacularly. But this one would have been notable. This would have been solid. But now you guys are getting it for episode 198, and I'm happy for that. Now, the reason I'm so busy and so tired and so parched and in need of hydration is that I've been working my butt off, because tonight, to you guys, we are performing the Dirty Dirty Con Game Show at Days of the Dead Atlanta for the first time. Now, this is only the second show we have done somewhere other than Dragon Con. We're very excited. We got a lot of cool stuff planned, and chances are, if you didn't already know about it, you're probably not going to be there, but it's going to be a lot of fun. And then tomorrow is a Toy Stories panel, also at Days of the Dead. I'm very, very proud that Needless Things and the Dirty Con Game Show could be part of this convention because it's such a fun, low-key, awesome horror convention where you can meet some of the coolest people because the guests, they always have really cool guests, but it's much smaller scale than Dragon Con, so the guests are kind of just hanging out and having fun with everybody else. But you guys already know that because last week's episode, which I hope you listened to, was our pal Son of Celluloid, Nathan Hamilton, talking all about Days of the Dead with yours truly. So you hopefully have heard everything that you need to hear about Days of the Dead. But I'm very, very excited. Days of the Dead is going on all weekend. By the time you listen to this, I'm probably already down there and immersed in horror partying. I've got a new suit for the game show. I don't know yet what I'm wearing for the Toy Stories panel, but I do know that our pals Ryan Cadaver and Battle Cougar are going to be on that Toy Stories panel. Andrew Bones, maybe. Some other art/toy dealer luminaries could show up. I don't have a solid guest list for that yet, but it's going to be awesome. This is going to be a great time. And Atlanta is taking over Days of the Dead. Saturday night, Casket Creatures and Elzig are playing the main event of Days of the Dead. And I have 4 o'clock is Toy Stories. After that, I've got nothing on the schedule. I'm going to be partying my buns off, you guys. It's going to be a good time. We've actually got somebody coming to stay with Little Troublemaker here in the Phantom Zone / Westworld. So it's going to be party time all weekend long. Woo. I think that's about all I've got for you as far as an intro this week because me and Mr. Beau Brown cover a lot of ground. So I'm going to go ahead and say, if you go to needlessthingspodcast.com, click on that big old Amazon box in the top right corner, order your stuff there. Order whatever. Order anything you want. If you need a mask for a horror convention, order it there. If you need replacement toothbrush heads, order them there. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and every little bit that you spend there helps us out. We get a little kickback. It costs you nothing extra. So go to needlessthingspodcast.com, order your stuff through the Amazon link, and help us out. All right, you guys, it is time for me and Mr. Beau Brown to get down in downtown Eternia talking about Masters of the Universe. Enjoy. Mr. Beau Brown, I want to talk about how we got into He-Man. Because
I would love to.
You and I have talked, like I said, in earlier podcasts, we've kind of thrown it out here and there, but let's make a cohesive Beau Brown and Dave West, which, by the way, I think this is the first time Beau Brown and Dave West have talked about He-Man.
Ooh, that's true. It's always been Dave and Beau and the Phantom.
Yeah, right? So how did Beau Brown and Dave West get into He-Man? Now you're a bit younger than me, so actually I'm going to
not that much.
A little bit. What are you? You're
38.
38. Oh, I thought you were younger than that.
It's my youthful exuberance.
Yeah.
Most people think I'm younger than I am.
You do have a tremendous amount of youthful exuberance.
Thank you.
I'm just to be fair for the listeners, I'm 41. I know,
but I could pass it. I could pass it like 35.
Dude, I think you could pass younger than that.
Ooh,
I really do. I think you could be a sexy 28. I'm not lying.
Ooh,
yeah.
Not in HD.
You would be
on stage, yes. Not in HD.
You would be some bear's delightful young treat. I'm not lying. Let's start with you since you're the guest. What was your gateway into He-Man?
It's hard to say because I was young when it all went down. I have very young memories, very specific memories of the vintage line. I have a memory of being in preschool and having a Cobra Khan figure, and I remember sitting in a hallway in the preschool, which was a church, because that's what you do when you're poor. You send your kids to church for preschool.
Well, when you're poor or you're religious.
Or you're religious, yeah. But my parents weren't religious, and church preschool is just cheap,
right?
Because you know, churches are like cigarette companies. You just got to get them while they're young, is their attitude, and that's why they offer really cheap preschool. So they're like, "Hey, kid, you want to hear about Jesus?"
Oh my gosh, that's
like, what's that?
That's so cynical and yet so true.
Oh, it's absolutely true. And I remember sitting in the hallway of the preschool and like putting water in my Cobra Khan figure and squirting it into my mouth to like drink water out of it.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
You want to hear a crazy side note preschool story?
Of course I do.
Okay. So do you remember your basic set of wooden building blocks?
Yes.
Right. So there's like.
Are you talking about the ones with the letters on them? Or...
No. Like the wooden, no paint, no numbers, no nothing. Like basic shapes.
Okay, triangles and trapezoids.
There's triangle. No. There's no trapezoids and building blocks. There's the arch. There are a bunch of rectangles.
Okay, I'm with you.
And then there's the wedge, the long wedge.
And they're all made of like they're varnished
wood.
pine.
Yeah, right. So you know the wedge. You know the one I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Long. It's like 4 or 5 inches long.
It looks like a doorstop.
Looks exactly like a doorstop. So there were 2 troublemaker kids in my preschool class. Ooh. I remember this much.
Ooh.
And they were in the blocks area, and there was an altercation.
Oh, man.
And one of the kids picked up the wedge and jammed it into the top of the other kid's head.
What?
I'm not fucking kidding at all. There was blood. It was the first time as a human, like in my life, I had seen a significant amount of blood.
Oh my gosh.
It was crazy. Like the police showed up, the ambulance showed up. It was crazy. This kid literally, like, you know the Sword and the Stone?
Yeah.
It was that in reverse.
Oh
like,
my gosh.
It jammed the fucking wedge into the top of this kid's head, and blood. I mean, he's not that strong, you know.
But you're in preschool,
insane.
So
you've insane.
You've still got like some soft spot up there.
Yeah, it was crazy. Blood was everywhere.
Oh.
It was in fact bonkers.
I feel like this is the Pee-wee's Playhouse word of the day.
It is the totally word of the show.
I hope the listeners are all screaming and yelling when we say bonkers.
It's not just word of the show. I mean, for me, it's word of the year. I mean, bonkers is the word of the year.
I'm down with that.
But it was in fact completely bonkers. I had never experienced anything like that. So sidebar, blood. Not the first time that I experienced a shitload of blood in my life, but
really?
That's a story for another time.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Anyway, but other memories, I have these other memories of my mom going away on a trip, and she brought me back a whiplash. I remember being sort of at an airport, and she brought me back a whiplash. I have some specific memories about getting web store, and it was what attracted me to He-Man as a kid. Which then translated into to other toy lines, was the variety.
Yeah,
what was the variety of characters, the bigness of them, and and that was when you research or learn about Mattel and what they were doing, the main competitors were Star Wars, G.I. Joe, and the fact that He-Man figures were so big. And then we don't really think about them as big now, but when you look at them against a G.I. Joe or a Kenner,
sure,
a Kenner Star Wars figure, I mean, your He-Man figure is bigger than a Star Wars vehicle.
Well, Star Wars at the time, and look, to be for ultimate transparency here, this is only fresh in my mind because I just watched The Toys That Made Us, which listeners,
I still have yet to see. And
dude, here's the thing: the He-Man episode. I don't know that any of the episodes told me a whole lot that I didn't already know, aside from the Barbie episode, which I didn't know anything about. But I've seen online a lot of people say, "Oh, I skipped the Barbie episode." Motherfuckers, you need to go back and watch that Barbie episode because that shit is crazy. The people that made Barbie were crazy. Barbie is easily the most dramatic and insane one of all of them, but the Masters episode really it's really interesting and it's a lot of information that I already knew presented in a more cohesive narrative form.
Sure.
But it disappointed me because out of all the episodes, they curse a whole lot. And I'd like to sit down and watch it with my son. And yeah, he's heard all the words, but at the same time,
that's not what you want to do. Yeah,
right. I don't need my dad. I don't need my son seeing the guy that created He-Man saying "fuck" like 5 times.
Right.
I felt like that was an odd decision on the part of the producers, but it's a solid thing. But they said that the main competition at the time, because G.I. Joe and He-Man came out right around the same time, but Star Wars was the big beast in the market.
Yes.
Star Wars was the one that everybody wanted to kill.
Yeah.
And that's what they talk about in that episode. They talk specifically about, I looked at the Star Wars figures and they were these skinny little figures, and then we looked at our He-Man and he's this big, muscular, powerful man, and we were like, we got gold.
Yep. Yep, that's what it was, and it wasn't. For me, it wasn't. It really wasn't the muscularity, or I don't think that's not even a word, but
I like muscularity.
It wasn't the muscles.
We'll allow it.
We'll allow it, but it wasn't that they were beefy. It was really more of the variety, and that you had aliens and wizards and guys with guns and tech, and that it really truly was the kitchen sink of toys. And that's what attracted it to me. Like, what I wanted was just a giant ensemble cast of characters to play with. And I felt like in a way that that Star Wars characters was like, it was still kind of all about Luke and the main cast. And there were tons of other toys and tons of other figures, but you were talking about characters that literally had showed up in the background of a scene.
Right.
And they were selling toys of background characters. And I felt like the Masters characters all were really fleshed out. They all had personalities. You knew who they were. They were all so different.
The other advantage though that Masters of the Universe had, which by the way, until 10 years ago, I just called it He-Man. I didn't even refer to it as Masters of the Universe. And
they referred to it as the He-Man line.
Yeah.
Whatever.
But to me, He-Man had the advantage of a daily cartoon.
Yeah.
Whereas Star Wars, back then, way back in the day when we were kids, Star Wars...
There were 3 movies and that was it,
And you had probably seen them a couple of times at most and didn't even realize... we didn't even know who Ponda Baba, Walrus Face, we didn't even know who that was really.
Right.
He was just some crazy alien in an orange and blue leotard that was part of this toy line that we liked. Whereas we could go visit He-Man and Prince Adam after school Monday through Friday every day. Yeah. So we got this constant ongoing narrative. And I think that more than anything else is what allowed G.I. Joe and He-Man and Transformers and everything else to kind of push Star Wars out of the market.
Yeah.
Because Star Wars didn't have that constant reminder of what it was.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree with that.
I've got two stories. I was only going to have one, but your story of preschool violence reminded me of something. Nothing to do with He-Man at all, but my first experience with violence. I don't know what grade it was. I don't remember what the condition was, but a girl stabbed me with a number 2 pencil.
Where?
In the ear.
Ooh, wow!
Went through my earlobe and broke off. I went to the school nurse, and she had to pull the graphite out of my ear, and I still to this day have a little gray mark, because I've got the spacers in my ears, but right beside the left ear spacer, there's this little gray mark, and it's where this girl stabbed me through the earlobe with a number 2 pencil. So that's my first experience with violence. And they talk about He-Man not being able to punch people. Meanwhile, kindergartners are getting stabbed in the
stabbing
ear,
each other.
Or preschoolers getting stabbed in the head with fucking wooden blocks.
Right. Yeah.
But then my He-Man specific story, I went to, and I don't know who the friend was, and it doesn't matter. At McDonald's, it used to be a big deal when I was around. Let's see, He-Man came out in 82 or 83. Right around there. I was 6.
Yeah, I want to say 82 sounds right.
I think it was 82.
But,
I was 6 or 7 when He-Man came out. And when I was 6 or 7, it was a big deal to have your birthday party at McDonald's and to have the McDonald's Play Place birthday party. And they had like a special McDonald's cake and special McDonald's balloons. And
yeah, they don't do that anymore.
No, they don't do that anymore. And there were even McDonald's locations that had little rooms for these birthday parties.
Yeah.
And this was one of those. So we were having the McDonald's birthday party, and this kid got a bunch of He-Man figures. He got I remember Moss Man specifically, and I don't think Moss Man was the first series.
No, he wasn't in the first wave.
I think he was.
He was in the original 8.
Let's see here.
Like 2 or 3
I'm on
waves in.
He-Man.org, and now I'm wondering if it was even really Moss Man, because he's the 4th wave. This is 1985. I would have been 9, so it couldn't have been Moss Man. It had to be. There was another figure I latched onto, because this had to be earlier than that. But this kid received a bunch of He-Man figures for his birthday, and I was fascinated because they were so big and because they were these weird creatures and monsters. And I remember specifically, aside from the setting, I remember the McDonald's setting. I remember thinking that He-Man himself was stupid. I had no interest in him whatsoever, but whatever monster figures this kid had, like when everybody else went out to the playground to ride the little fry guys, ride-ons, and go down
the springy,
and climb up the inside of Grimace or whatever. Which, boy, that sounds really repulsive.
That phrasing was
that's bad phrasing.
Choice.
But when everybody else went out on the playground to play, I stayed in the little room and played with all of his He-Man figures, and I'm almost positive it was that first wave. I feel like it was 1982 or 83. But
that would have been Ram Man, Man at Arms, Tila,
Beastman,
Merman,
and I feel like Merman was one of them because I've always had an attachment to Merman. But I love aquatic stuff, so maybe. But I just know that I stayed inside.
Total sidebar. Have you seen The Shape of Water?
Yes.
Jesus,
fucking shit, dude. Beautiful.
The movie is so amazing.
It killed me. It killed me. And I'll tell you, it's totally inappropriate for me to say here in the middle of our He-Man Toys podcast.
It's you and me. It's you and me and all of our friends.
It's you and me.
And all of our wonderful friends. But it's you and me too.
I'm going to put this out there. There are lots of absolutely amazing, wonderful things about The Shape of Water. It reinforced my love of Michael Shannon as an actor. It reinforced my love of Guillermo del Toro. But to me, one of the most powerful things about The Shape of Water is it showed a woman masturbating on screen.
Not just once.
Not just once. It was part of her daily routine.
Yeah.
And I think, and look, I'm not saying this from it's sexy point of view, because that's not where I'm coming from at all. And, it wasn't presented.
It wasn't the point.
Right. It wasn't
was part of her routine.
Yes. It wasn't presented as a sexy thing.
It was like her boiled eggs. So like, get up in the morning, do.
And I
fucking flake my bean, fucking boil some eggs,
yes.
And
I think, particularly in America, normalizing sexuality is something that's very important that's not being looked at as much as some other things right now.
I would completely agree.
So that to me, because that happened within the first 15 minutes of the movie. And I was just blown away. I was like, man, this, more than anything else that happens in this movie, is important. And I hope people see this and accept it and are like, oh, this is cool. This is fine. There's no taboo here.
Right.
This is something that happens and should happen and isn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Because that to me, any kind of movement, any kind of acceptance of things begins with the thought of, oh, this isn't a big deal. Because when I was a kid, boy, I am going off on a tangent, Mr. Beau Brown.
Yeehaw, let's do it.
When I was a kid, Kids in the Hall, watching Kids in the Hall is...
Oh, yeah, your buddy story, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Watching Scott Thompson and watching the homosexual stuff on that show is...
And it was normal. And it wasn't
it was
weird.
Fine. It was no big deal. Yeah. It didn't matter. And that's what turned my brain into, oh, this is fine. This is no big deal. These are normal, funny guys that, some of them just happen to do that. And it's just part of how things are. And I think the most incredible tool to getting people to accept things is not screaming about it. It's just saying, look at this, it's no big deal. So that to me, and then the whole rest of the movie is gorgeous. I don't want to make it sound like it's some kind of screed for female masturbation, but that to me was the moment where I was like, wow, Guillermo del Toro is a guy who is going to take anything he believes in and say, look, take my hand, come on this ride, and we're all going to have a cool time. I'm going to show you some weird shit, but you're going to dig it. And you're going to realize, wow, weird shit can be really cool.
Yeah.
And maybe it isn't weird shit at all. Because by the end of the movie, not only have we seen her do her thing, but we've also been like, you know what? Her falling in love with the other, it's not a big deal. I understand it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of powerful stuff going on in that movie, man.
Well, and it's an incredible example of what can happen when a visionary director finally makes enough money,
right,
to produce their own movie and not have a studio to tell them what they can and can't do and what audiences will and won't like.
Well, and
for it to be receiving the praise and the acclaim that it has,
right?
Definitely Golden Globes, and I'm go ahead and saying this movie's going to fucking get an Oscar. I don't know what for. This movie's getting an Oscar. That only. You want to see what Pacific Rim money looks like? It looks like motherfucking Shape of Water. That's what that money looks like.
Yes.
Because only by making that insane amount of money on Pacific Rim and Pacific Rim 2, which he's already been paid for, he's cashing those checks.
Oh, fuck.
It is empowering and sad at the same time.
Well,
because there's no way in a million years that if he had not produced this movie himself with his own money,
right,
that you could convince a studio to say, I'm going to make a movie about a lady falling in love with a fish man and she jerks off in the first fucking 15 minutes. Like,
right.
There is no way in hell this movie would have ever been made if a visionary director like Del Toro hadn't made gigantic mainstream success and made the money that it takes to put a movie like this in mainstream theaters, and as expensive as the special effects were to have this movie made without a giant studio funding it.
Yeah.
Oh, this is not some experimental fucking movie that somebody like, this movie is made because Guillermo del Toro made a buttload of fucking money and finally was in a position.
Yeah,
that
this
say,
isn't, and
no one can tell me no.
And this
no
isn't,
one can tell me.
This isn't like Pitch Black or The Babadook or anything like that. Like, this is somebody who Hollywood is like, man, we can't even deny this guy.
Hollywood didn't have a fucking say in it.
Right.
He produced this movie entirely himself. There was no studio that could say, because you can see the moments in the movie that the studio would have been, I don't know.
Oh, well, no, what
right?
we were just talking about. You're not going to have a female masturbating in a movie at all.
You want to do a musical number with the Fishman?
Right.
You want to do
never
what? Like, yeah, that never would have happened. Like, and the movie is so good. The movie is so good.
If Doug Jones
that the musical number does not feel out of place at all.
Doug
do you
Jones
have any idea how hard that
has to receive some recognition for that movie.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
He won't.
They'll give Andy Serkis a fucking Oscar, but they won't give Doug Jones one,
which is insane to me. All right, we got to get back to Masters.
Yeah, sorry.
Which, by the way,
also He-Man.
By the way, Doug Jones is.
It was Merman. It was like a Merman segue.
It was totally Merman. So anyway, that was my before that whole tangent happened. The birthday party, I stayed inside playing with He-Man figures while all the other kids that I didn't give a shit about went outside to ride the Fry Guys. Yeah. From there, I watched the He-Man cartoon every single day. G.I. Joe was my obsession, and my parents were, I'm not going to say I didn't have other toys here and there, because I totally did. I had some He-Man toys. I had some Visionaries. I had, weird shit here and there, but I didn't, unlike now, I didn't just collect every toy line I wanted to collect. So He-Man wasn't my focus, but I always loved it. But for you, I think it was a different story.
Yeah, He-Man was definitely my focus. I started with Star Wars. I remember having the little pewter painted miniatures that came in sets. I had the Hoth set of the little pewter miniatures.
Are you talking about the Microverse?
I don't know what it was called back then.
Like it was.
All I knew was
the little still the unposable figures that were probably about an inch tall.
Yeah, they were tiny little were little miniatures. They were tiny little metal.
Oh, dude, you so need to watch The Toys That Made Us, because the first episode is Star Wars, and they talk about the Microverse, and it's the people that created it talking about it. Because I've always wondered, because I wanted the Microverse stuff, but my parents wouldn't get it because they were like, "You've already got the big stuff. Why would you want these little tiny things?" But
it's so funny to call the Star Wars figures the big stuff.
Oh, well, I know, right?
Because compared to He-Man, they're fucking puny as shit. Yeah,
but the Microverse stuff, Kenner at the time was trying to figure out how can we make more money off of Star Wars. Let's launch this other line of small stuff. And as awesome as it was, because it was better scaled play sets, it just didn't take off because we all already had the 3 3/4 inch figures and vehicles and whatever else, and people just didn't go for it. But they had the Hoth set, they had the Bespin set, they had the Death Star. So that you had some of those.
I did. I had the Hoth set. I have very specific memories. We had a den that had a three steps down, like a split level. So we had 3 steps down from the sort of first living room that you walk into, when you come in the front door, to another den.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That's what we call. So there are 3 steps. And I remember sitting at the base of those 3 steps playing with the Hoth set. And then I also have very, very vivid memories of playing in a sandbox in the backyard with the regular size figures, and it was Tatooine, and and actually the people who bought the house after we moved out say one of the great stories of the neighborhood or whatever is that they kept finding Star Wars figures in the sandbox that I had lost or buried or some combination thereof. In the sandbox. So those were probably my earliest toy memories was Star Wars. And then I transferred over to He-Man. And He-Man for me, I guess I feel like there was more imagination in the sense that, yeah, I knew the show, but the figures were more impactful on me and my imagination play than the show was. Whereas what I knew about, even younger, what I knew about the world of Star Wars and my play with Star Wars was much more dictated, I think, by the story of Star Wars. Whereas I feel like I had more freedom with the toys of He-Man to play sort of however I wanted, and the cast of characters, I think, lent themselves better to a more freeform play, whereas I feel like the Star Wars toys were really locked into their narrative.
That's very interesting, because I hadn't thought about it until you said it just now, but I was the same way with Star Wars versus G.I. Joe. With G.I. Joe, I felt like I could tell my own stories. I felt much freer, but in my memories of playing with Star Wars, I feel like I was more locked into a specific narrative.
Yeah, you were playing out the movie. You were just playing out the movie.
Right,
yeah.
Even though at that point, I had only seen the movies probably one time each. I mean, let's look back. And, Return of the Jedi came out in 1983. I would guess in 1983, I had seen each of those movies once. Well, probably a couple of times for Star Wars and Empire, because I'm sure they played them on TV a little bit. But I hadn't seen any of the movies more than 3 times. I think that's a fair bet.
Sure, yeah.
Whereas when G.I. Joe came out, we got the cartoon, and it outlined, well, and for me, the comic book was even more important than the cartoon, but I felt more freedom of play with those. And I guess because with He-Man and with G.I. Joe, we had these episodic adventures that allowed for more missions or adventures or whatever you want to call them in between. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's what it was.
Well, I think part of it was that you had toy characters that weren't in the show, right? Like with Star Wars, everything came from the movie. With He-Man, the toys came first, and they sort of tried to write a show around the toys.
Right, like Stinkor and Mossman weren't in every episode, so you kind of had to figure out where they fit in.
Stinkor wasn't even in an episode.
Oh, I don't even know. I was just throwing it in.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, there are characters that never were in the show. And so they come from different directions. He-Man was a toy line that then had a television show to act as a commercial for some of the toys, but then, of course, Filmation, in all of its wisdom, were like, no, we're going to tell stories and not make a commercial. Whereas Star Wars was a movie that then meticulously made toys on every single fucking thing that you saw in the movie. That's why you have, like, background action figures of the guy who walked through a scene, and that's right. Whereas that didn't happen with He-Man. He-Man was toy focused, and then the show created a universe and a world around those toys, around the characters that were the original toys. But that's why there are pretty big discrepancies between the show and the vintage line.
Right.
Where you have characters that just weren't there at all, or they're in like an episode, and you have vehicles, specifically vehicles that are in the show that are not toys. Whereas if there was a vehicle in Star Wars, it had a fucking toy. The toys came first with He-Man, and I think that's probably what led to, I think, more of a freedom from the narrative, because it was toys based in, are these toys fun to play with, rather than how do we make toys about the things that are in this movie, which is what Star Wars was.
Yeah, and you're right. It was, because Star Wars was a movie inspiring toys. Masters was toys inspiring a cartoon.
Yeah.
So there is a different, but it's really wild. And once again, until we were talking about it tonight, I didn't really think about it. But my play patterns were entirely different with not as much with Masters, because I probably didn't have more than 10 Masters of the Universe figures when I was a kid. But, G.I. Joe is a fair equivalent because it was the same scenario, and my Star Wars and G.I. Joe play patterns were very different.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Well, let's take a look. Do you remember what your first He-Man figures were? Like how how did you start building that collection?
I got them as gifts. I mean, I remember getting them for birthday and Christmas presents. I couldn't say what my first one was. I know that I had the castle. I did not have Snake Mountain, but I have very specific memories about going to the mall and throwing a penny in the fountain at the mall, and my wish was to get Snake Mountain.
Oh.
For years, that was my wish. Like, what do you, if you, here, kid, you have one wish, what is it? And I wanted Snake Mountain.
Oh, that's awesome.
That was what I wanted.
Oh.
And here I am, still waiting for that classic Snake Mountain.
Oh my gosh, that's right, because they showed us a classic Snake Mountain.
We sure have seen it.
Do you think that's ever going to happen?
I think that they want to make it happen, but it's really tough. I mean, it's tough to bring it into a price point.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's bigger than the castle, and the castle was
the castle's
bonkers.
Insane. It is bonkers.
Yeah, the castle's bonkers, and Snake Mountain is like twice as crazy and bonkers as the castle is,
yeah.
And because it's not just like, oh, we're going to make a vintage castle like the vintage toy,
right?
Because there's not as much of a discrepancy between the castle and the cartoon and the castle toy,
right?
Whereas there's this gigantic discrepancy between the Snake Mountain vintage toy and Snake Mountain as it's portrayed in the show.
And I think the Four Horsemen did a brilliant job with the prototype that they showed.
No, they did, but because you have to marry those two ideas, it's literally like two play sets,
right,
worth of shit.
And we're probably talking $500.
I have no idea where it's going to land. But there's also huge issues with like the inside of Snake Mountain, having enough stuff that it's not just the shell and all this. I mean, it's really hard.
You've got to have the bone throne. You've got to have the whatever Skeletor's scrying pool is. I can't remember what it was called.
I don't know the name, but
yeah, it's tough.
No, it's tough. It's tough, and So I guess those are old memories. I definitely have huge memories of like, if I had one wish, I just want Snake Mountain, and which is weird because the toy itself, was just a big gym repaint. Like they had this other jungle playset, and they just painted it purple.
I didn't even realize that.
Oh, you didn't know that story?
I know the Battle Cat story.
That's why it doesn't look anything. That's why it doesn't look anything like Snake Mountain.
Oh, that's wild.
It was a big gym playset that they repurposed and, you know, basically painted it purple.
Right.
It was like a jungle thing.
That's funny.
Yeah. So, but in the same thing, it's the same thing with the Fright Zone. I mean, the Fright Zone doesn't look anything like it looks in, you know.
No. Well, it's almost the opposite of what it looks like, because in the show it's this weird technological thing, and the toy is like a tree.
Yeah. The toy matches more with the original idea of the toys, which is we're going to basically make the Universal monsters as He-Man bad guys. And so it is more horror-y.
Yeah.
Than it is. It does not fit into the She-Ra universe that the show did.
Right.
Because originally the Horde was a He-Man bad guy line that She-Ra was not even a part of.
Yes.
It's a huge disconnect between the Horde as toys and She-Ra as a show and as toys.
Well, it's funny because in my head, the Horde toys are part of the Masters Universe line.
Yeah.
But
that's not in your head. That's how it was.
Oh, well, right. But then in the cartoon, they were the villains on the She-Ra cartoon. So I have even though I know I had Leech, and probably he was the only Horde figure that I had, but I don't really have clear ideas on anybody in the Horde because I didn't watch She-Ra when I was a kid because of the stupid "it's for girls," which is dumb. It's totally dumb.
Yeah.
But as a 8, 9, 10 or whatever year old kid in the 80s, that's how shit was. Yeah. It is.
No,
it was stupid, but that's how it was.
Yeah.
So I didn't have clear definitions on those guys.
Yeah. So you have the toy, so you have the play set, which is, very much in that horror theme. It's got a spooky tree. It's got a spooky cave. It's got a spooky cage. It's built around them as toys.
Right. Completely
independent of the show. Now, at least it was an original sculpt, unlike Snake Mountain, which was, repurposed big gym thing. But also completely unrelated from those characters' appearance on the show.
Right.
I did have a connection to She-Ra because I had one of those like your first girlfriend experiences.
Well, let me say this real quick, so I don't sound like a total barbarian. I did not watch She-Ra, but this is coming from a guy who, when Strawberry Shortcake came out, wanted a Strawberry Shortcake doll so bad because they smelled so good.
They did smell good.
That's where I just wanted to put that in some perspective.
Sure. Put it in perspective. Yeah. So I had like a kindergarten girlfriend.
Really?
Named Emily. Yeah. I had one of those like, oh, it's your girlfriend,
Oh.
So I would go over to her house and we had play dates and stuff, and she had the She-Ra toys. And I was like, there they are. Like, it was this amazing, because my parents weren't buying me She-Ra dolls, like that wasn't even a thing. Like, they didn't even think about it. And my sister was too young really for them, so she didn't really have them. And here was this girl that was my age that had all the She-Ra figures. And I was like,
man.
There they are. This is it. Like, it made total sense. And I was like, I wanted to bring my He-Man figures over and it made sense to me, and it didn't matter that they had rooted hair and they were more doll-like. I was like, no, this is it. I'll bring mine. You have yours. Boom. Like, yeah. So I had that connection, and so that I didn't feel weird watching the show. Like, it wasn't like a girl show. It was still He-Man to me, and Secret of the Sword, Bridge the Gap, and it was fine. And I had, even though I didn't have She-Ra figures, they were still accessible to me. And I remember thinking they were cool, and different, but I knew they were still He-Man. And it didn't bother me in any way that they were different.
Right.
But I also didn't have like why don't I have these? It wasn't like I got that they were girl toys, I understood. Like, I understood that they were girl toys, and that was fine, and that's why I didn't have them.
You were just like, it's cool that I have the opportunity to play with them.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, cool. You have, and to me, it was, you have the characters that I want. It was less, it didn't bother me that the toys looked different, that they didn't, visually, that they weren't the same as my He-Man figures. To me, it was always about the characters.
Now, let me ask you, because it's been a while since I've seen a vintage She-Ra figure. How different, aside from the rooted hair, how different were She-Ra and her friends from, like, Teela?
Not terribly different. I mean, they were basically the same scale as, your Evelyn and your.
That's what I was thinking. Is that the hair was? But
they did have the rooted hair, and they did have fabric clothes.
Oh, right. They had the skirts.
So they were different. So they did feel more like dolls.
But as far as
clothes,
the hair, general aesthetics and scaling, they did fit.
Well, to my childhood mind, I didn't give a shit at all. Like, it was like, cool, I'll bring my Mantenna, I'll bring my Hordak, I'll bring my Leech, and we'll do this, because she didn't have the She-Ra bad guys.
Oh,
she had Catra. Sure, she had Catra, and that was it.
Catra it?
Pretty much. They didn't have a Scorpia. I mean, no, that's not true. They had Entraptra, they had a couple of them, but I think this was very early on. And I think that at the stage that I knew her, Catra was it. They hadn't gotten to Entrapta or who else?
What a weird situation to have, where you have, because She-Ra was very successful.
Mm-hmm.
But what a weird situation where the villains from the She-Ra cartoon
are in a completely other toy line,
right?
Basically.
That most girls probably didn't even have.
Yeah,
that's so interesting. I wonder if that's ever happened, like, in pop culture, and I don't think it has.
No, that is a good question. I don't know. I don't think so.
That's wild, man.
But yeah, there was no presence of the Horde. It was like, Catra was the jealous beauty. I mean, there was no mention of the Horde, really. Like, Hordak wasn't. I mean, and maybe if I go back and look at the original Catra card back, maybe it talks about that. But, like, if it wasn't pink, and because Catra was still pink, yeah, but there wasn't, you didn't have any of the monstrous Horde members. I mean, even Scorpia, there wasn't a Scorpia.
There was no Scorpia. There was no
Scorpia. There was no Octavia. They didn't have those figures.
Yeah.
You got entrapped. You definitely had entrapped. You had. Let's see. I'm trying to look.
You didn't have Octavia.
No, you didn't have Octavia. You didn't have any of the monstery.
Natossa's a good guy, right?
Natossa's a good guy. Okay. Yeah. There really just weren't a lot of female villains.
And in the heads of Mattel, they're probably thinking, well, that these are adventure dolls, but they're still basically just wanting to comb their hair and stuff.
Right.
Let's move ahead, because we got I definitely want to, within the next.
Well, we went on a decently long Shape of Water tangent.
I think people are going to like that, though.
Yeah. I mean, Merman, whatever.
Yeah, Merman.
Like, it wasn't completely off base.
Totally works. So as kids,
strong female lead.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's jump ahead to 2002.
All right.
And the revival, the attempted revival. I say attempted revival.
Let me hit one thing first before we get there.
Okay.
Because just as far as the history of toys goes, because I went directly from He-Man to Ninja Turtles as a what toys I had. And He-Man completely informed why I liked Ninja Turtles. And it was the exact same reason, which was the giant, crazy, diverse ensemble cast.
Yes.
That the Turtles action figure line had that same kitchen sink mentality of, I want just a million different super different characters, which is why I never got into Transformers. I never got into G.I. Joe, and this is a conversation we have had lots of times. But I just wanted to put that out there that that was what attracted me to toys, was the diversity of the characters.
Well, and what's funny about that is, even though we diverge because He-Man was your jam and G.I. Joe was mine, I actually had the same experience in that G.I. Joe got too far away from what I loved about G.I. Joe, and then Ninja Turtles came along and was offering all of these crazy designs, these beautiful sculpts, and even though their elbows didn't bend, their knees didn't bend, but they just looked so cool, and I was really getting to a point where I was much more into things being aesthetically interesting than them necessarily having, because I watched it every day, but I was never in love with the Ninja Turtles cartoon. Every episode I watched, I wanted it to be better than it was. I was never happy with it, but I watched it.
I loved it. I was all totally on board.
I watched it because the toys were so amazing to me.
Interesting.
So I transitioned to Ninja Turtles from G.I. Joe in a completely different way from how you transitioned from Masters to Ninja Turtles. But it is funny that we had that same path at that point, and the Ninja Turtles, for me, were offering something completely different, and for you,
and they were the only thing offering me what made He-Man work for me.
Yes, absolutely. So
that all said and done.
Yes, that all said and done.
So then jump ahead to 2002.
2002, when Mattel is like, all right, we did New Adventures of He-Man, which I guess I've got to take a little sidebar there and explain.
Yeah, I guess we have to do that. Yeah,
that I did, because another reason I was never huge into the original Masters toy line is because they just didn't, that sameness I didn't love. They only had the 5 points of articulation, and that to me always felt slightly limited, because G.I. Joe won my heart from Star Wars because of the articulation. And it's funny, again, going back to the toys that made us, they have interviews with the Hasbro personnel who very specifically say, we want to do something in the same scale as Star Wars, but we want to make it better. We want to give them better articulation. And they cite the sources of their design as Migos Chips figures. And that's how they got me, was their elbows bend, and then later on their biceps swivel, their knees bend, like, oh my gosh, look how much more they can do. And He-Man, to me, felt limited. But then once we get to Ninja Turtles, the insanity to me was it overbalanced the lack of articulation, so it worked.
Well, and in Ninja Turtles, other than it suffering from the same stigma that He-Man did, of we're just going to keep putting out different versions of He-Man and Skeletor.
Yeah.
Ninja Turtles was very... What Ninja Turtles made the same mistake that He-Man did, which was, we're going to keep putting out the same basic 4 turtles in different costumes.
Over and over
again, but they didn't suffer from it in the sense that they weren't reusing parts.
Right.
On their other characters. Like,
so you'd get
even through, like, you still were getting a kangaroo guy and even late in the line, you were still getting characters with completely unique sculpts.
You're getting a bull, a dragon, a mole, a worm man, a muck man, mutagen man. Like, you're still getting
you were still getting the basic 4 turtles. Yeah, you were still getting basic 4 turtles every now and then, because that's just how it was. And we still suffer from that today with, well, kids just want to go to Walmart and get a Batman, and they still want to go to Walmart and get a Spider-Man. They don't give a shit what it is. They just want a Batman. They just want a Spider-Man. That shit has never gone away. but they weren't doing that on their other cast of characters with the reuse of parts that He-Man did. That was what made He-Man stale.
Which creates a wonderful segue to, because I have to talk about Adventures of He-Man, because I did dip into that line, New Adventures of He-Man, very briefly, because I saw He-Man and I saw Skeletor in the store, and I was like, oh, look at that. Their elbows bend, their knees bend. Look at this better articulation. I want to check these out because I love the idea of Masters of the Universe. So I had New Adventures He-Man and New Adventures Skeletor, but that's all I ever had because I got them, and the rest of the figures didn't appeal to me that much. And then I saw the cartoon, and the cartoon was horrible.
Ugh.
So that was a brief pit stop for me on the way to 2002, where I would have to say that those cartoons and that toy line is where I truly fell in love with Masters of the Universe.
Wow. Really?
Yes.
Wow. See, it killed it for me.
What?
It was the nail. Oh, New Adventures?
No. 2002.
Oh, no.
No,
Okay.
New Adventures
Sorry.
was I got those figures and I was like, I like these figures just fine, but everything else about it is horrible.
Yeah, my parents got them for me, and I remember getting them for Christmas and just being like, "What the fuck is this?" Like,
right.
I was, and then I watched the cartoon, and it was like, "This is
terrible." It's not
painful.
It's not even watchable. Like I
tried. Yeah, Michael and I tried, and we couldn't even make it through the first episode.
No, there's nothing.
So
there's nothing. No, 2002 is where I truly fell in love with Masters as a franchise. Because I got way into that toy line. The cartoon, I watched it as much as I could, but I feel like it got moved around a lot. I didn't see.
Get the DVDs, man. The DVDs
I've got them.
Super
I've got
cheap.
them.
Oh yeah,
That's
so
where.
good.
And it's probably at least 10 years ago. No, more than that, because I got them before my son was born.
Right.
But until I got those DVDs, I had never seen more than 10 episodes of the cartoon because when it came on, I was...
No, it was not easy to watch.
Yeah, well, they moved it around a lot, and also I was young at the time, and I was out. I was doing stuff. Like, it was, let's see, 2002, so I would have been 24, maybe. 96.
I was 22.
Yeah, I would have been 24, 25 years old. So, I mean, I was working at the masquerade. I was out and about doing things.
Yeah, you weren't as into watching cartoons.
Well, no, I was totally into watching cartoons, but I couldn't keep up with it. I couldn't set my VCR to record it at a specific time. It was just, I couldn't do it. But the toy line, I was fucking crazy into. I would hit Walmart every day looking for the new figures because I loved them. And to this day, as much as I love classics, that 2002 toy line in my head is the Masters toy line. Even though it still has that 5 points of articulation, the aesthetics, well, I guess they've got wrists. Their wrists move, so technically they've got 1, 2, 3, 4,
They may
5,
have had
6,
ankle.
7.
I don't know.
No, they don't.
Okay.
They've got 7 points of articulation, but I was so into that toy line, but Mattel made it so fucking hard to collect because they did 8 He-Mans per wave. With
they shot themselves in the foot.
Oh, they totally did. With two original characters, 8 He-Mans, 5 Skeletors. Yep. So when you go to Walmart, there's a whole wall of Ice Armor He-Man and Fang Butt Skeletor, and then if you manage to hit them at 5 a.m. when they just put out the new cases, you might get Beastman or Merman or Triclops. So I love that line, but man, Mattel just shit the bed with it. What was your?
That was a good vocal break. I have got to go pee real quick.
Yeah, man, I'm going to refresh my drink yet again.
I was waiting for a
things
space.
Are going to get even more incoherent, but I will pause it right now. I absolutely love that line, and I love what the Horsemen were doing with it. And this is an interesting side note. This is when we knew who were making the toys because Toy Fair magazine had started coming out.
Yeah.
And we were meeting the sculptors and the creators, and we were seeing advanced pictures. This is when we first started knowing what was on the way to stores, because prior probably 2000, I think Toy Fair magazine started coming out in 98 or 99, probably 99. Prior to that, you went to Toys R Us or Walmart or Target or whatever and just found new toys. But then Toy Fair magazine changed the game because they would start showing us these prototypes, 6 months to a year before they were actually going to hit stores. And it honestly changed the entire experience of being a collector. Because rather than just showing up to the store and being like, oh, cool, there's new stuff, I'm going to buy it, we had, in our heads, we would have these ideas of what was coming.
I had actually been completely out of toys since my childhood.
Oh,
until,
really? When did
until He-Man in 2002.
Because for me, I briefly stopped probably while I was in high school, but then when Kenner relaunched Star Wars in 95 is when I got back in, and since 95, I've been in.
I picked up a couple of things every now and then. Like if there was a character that I really liked from comics, maybe I would get a figure. I had a handful. I had a really good Scarecrow figure. I had a really good Mr. Freeze figure. I had the Max. There were a handful of, if I was really invested in the character, then I would pick up a toy, or somebody would give me a toy that was, but it was really about what was my fandom.
I've got to say this because I'm actually not sure what came first. It was either the relaunch of Star Wars in 95 or when Playmates released a box set of the classic Star Trek crew. And the box, inside the box was the bridge of the Enterprise, and it was Playmates released it. And it was the original crew. And my mom, even though I really wasn't buying toys, and my parents certainly weren't encouraging me buying toys, but my mom got me that set. I don't know if it was my birthday or Christmas or whatever. I can't remember exactly. But I still have that exact set that she got me. And I don't know if that came first or if the Star Wars relaunch came first. But whichever one of those things it was, that's what got me back in after 2 or 3 years of not collecting.
I did get into the Star Wars relaunch a little. I was like, oh, cool. I collected Star Wars, or not collected. Collected is totally not the right word.
Right.
I had Star Wars figures when I was a kid.
Plus, now Luke looks like He-Man.
I would love a 3PO or R2. I got that part and I had a couple of those. But there was something about, like you had said, there was something about those 2002, 2000X He-Man figures, and He-Man, that was what, those toys were what, and the show, were what ignited my fandom. I was not a vintage collector. I was not tracking down vintage He-Man figures before 2002. It was my favorite. When I look back, I was like, it was my favorite toy line, probably, and I can, as reasons that I have stated why I liked it. But it not only completely reignited my fandom of He-Man, but got me back into toy collecting. I mean, and that's not even back. Got me into toy collecting.
Right, that was like you had toys when you were a kid, and that was a thing. But the 2002 line is what made you an adult collector.
Right, and that was what, I mean, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah,
and here I am. It is still the only thing I collect, and it was the show. and it was the figures being and it is part of this phenomenon of the next generation of artists, where generational change has happened, and now you don't just have people who are artists who are creating new things that they think kids will buy or that they will be popular. You have an entire generation of artists who grew up being fans of something. And that is, and you know, when you talk about what made the 2000X figures so good, it was that they were made by the Four Horsemen, who are fucking fans.
Right. There's a different, a different kind of soul. And look, the original,
there's something that happened in the early 90s where the generation of kids that grew up on these big properties of Star Wars and Ninja Turtles and He-Man and all that shit became professionals and inherited these legacies.
Right.
And they did it in such a way that it's not just weird artists who are creating art that, you know, commercial art for purchase. You've got people who are reinventing and understanding what worked about the toy lines that they grew up with and were fans of, and shepherding those to a new generation.
Well, there's a whole new level
completely different, of
love and of soul on these figures, because when I look at the 2002 Beastman, I see a figure that was created by somebody who looked at the original Beastman and was like, this is what I saw Beastman as when I was a kid.
Right.
And
the Beastman should, and specifically with the 2000, and even more so with the Stactions. The Stactions is where they really pushed that envelope, which was, let's not be constrained by the scale of the box of the figure. The Four Horsemen, when they see Beastman, they didn't see a reuse figure.
Right.
They didn't see a figure who was to a character that was to scale with the rest of the figures. They said, Beastman is huge. He's a giant. He's a beast.
Right.
And Stinkor is smaller. They saw the soul of the character beyond the limitations of a line of toys that was entirely based on reuse of parts. Yes. They saw the true essence of those characters and wanted to realize them in a way that transcended the boundaries of what made He-Man, which was this reuse line, and that's one of the things that what makes the Staction so beautiful. As they're not toys, but like Web Store, it is this like pure distillation of who Web Store is.
Yes.
As a sculpture.
Well, and the same thing goes for Snouts. Well, I can't remember if it's Snout Spout or Spout Snout. Snout Spout.
It's Snout Spout. It's Jitsu, Mosquito. It's all of them.
Yes.
They were realizing, they were taking that chance and that opportunity to realize these characters, and that's something they wanted to do in the 2000X line, but were crippled by Mattel saying you need to make a fucking bajillion ass He-Mans,
right?
And we're just going to do a Snake Man wave, and we're just going to do a bunch of repaints and throw a couple of Snake Men into it. We're going to do Snake Capture Man at Arms, and he's going to have a different paint job, and a couple of different accessories. The Four Horsemen are it's Scott Nylick and the Four Horsemen. I mean,
yes,
that is all that it is.
Which is our segue to the Classics line, which I resisted because to me, the first figure they offered, I think it was King Grayskull. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was a San Diego exclusive.
The line didn't start off, to me, as interesting as the 2002 line. It just didn't.
No.
But I kept an eye on it because, again, Toy Fair Magazine kept us abreast of these developments. We knew that this line was coming. We knew that the Four Horsemen were behind it. We knew that it was a passion project, that, Mattel was sort of, okay, if you guys want to do this, we'll give it a shot. And, I watched it and I thought, well, I'm not going to sign up for some internet bullshit, because what is this internet thing anyway? It's probably the internet's probably not even going to exist in 5 years. This thing's stupid. But then they put up Scareglow, and I've told this story at Toy Stories panel. I've written it down, but for our Masters episode, that Scareglow got a preview wherever it got a preview, and I looked at it and I said, "Is a glow in the dark fucking purple skeleton, purple and green skeleton action figure. I want that figure."
Check.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I've got to have that figure. And I ordered it because this was back when it was still reasonable to go to MattyCollector.com and just order something on the day that it went up. Now, you still had to get there within the first couple hours of when it went on sale, but you could still reasonably go there on the day of sale and get something. So I ordered that Scareglow. He arrived, and even though Masters of the Universe Classics is very much based on shared parts in the same way that the original line was, maybe not to the same extent, but they definitely thrive.
I mean, maybe even, honestly, I would say maybe even more so.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I mean,
well,
that's
anyway,
part of it, and I appreciate that's part of it.
Well,
it's why we've never gotten it is part of why we have never gotten the ultimate, versions of certain characters, is because they were restricted to the tooling.
Right, they would have been 100% new tooling. But
for the season,
I got Scareglow, and I loved it. I felt like the execution of the figure within the restraints of the shared parts system was so good. With the glow in the dark was incredible. He's still one of the best glow in the dark figures that I own, and I own a lot.
Well, that's his thing. Like if you phone in the glow in the dark part,
you fucked up.
Yeah.
And then the cape that's partially translucent, and the little gray skull thing with the key inside. Like all of he to me was a demonstration of love of toys. And I was like, fuck, he's really, really good. And then they did one of their deals, because remember back in the day, they would have the new figure, but then they would also offer up, each month they would offer up different stock of older figures.
Yeah.
And at some point they offered up Skeletor again. Just the basic classics Skeletor. And I was like, well, shit. I really, really like that Scareglow. Let me go ahead and order that Skeletor, and then it'll just be skeleton guys. That's all I'm going to do is get my villain skeleton guys, and that's it.
Getting the skeleton guys is a gateway drug.
Oh, it so is. So I ordered Skeletor, and he came in the mail, and then I think a couple months after that, they were like, hey, we're re-offering Trapjaw. And I was like, well, Trapjaw is my fucking guy. So I gotta order Trapjaw, and I ordered Trapjaw, and Trapjaw is still one of my favorite action figures that I own. Not even just in the classics line, but just in everything in this fucking room. Yeah. That classics Trapjaw is one of my favorite figures of all time.
Perfect. He is
perfect. And then whenever they offered the subscription the next year after that, And I don't remember who they showed. I don't remember what I signed up for, but I was like, fuck it, I'm in. And from there on out, fortunately in those early days, they still did those deals where I was able to buy a He-Man, I was able to buy like a Battle Cat or whatever figures I had missed the first time around. They were still doing the, hey, it's February and we've got the new figure is Stinkor, but the extra figure you can order is, Moss Man that we did a year ago, but we're offering again. So I was able to, I currently only have, there's still only like 2 or 3 figures that I kind of wish I had. I don't. Web store is one of them. I wish I had a web store. I wish I had a Wondar.
Ooh, yeah. Good luck with that. But
dude,
you could probably get a web store, yeah.
But there are probably 2 or 3 figures that I don't have that I want. Other than that, I'm sitting here looking at,
your collection is very satisfying.
Yeah, at least 100 figures.
Yeah.
That I just fell in love with. And even, I've sold some off, but there's some oddball figures that if Mattel had called me up and been like, hey, Phantom, or hey, Dave, or whatever, do you think we should make this guy? I would have been like, fuck no. What are you, stupid?
Right.
But they did.
But
they made them, and they're on my shelf, and I'm like, fuck, I like that guy. I like and I can't remember his name right now, but the guy with the naked guy with the mohawk and the red gear and his...
Geldor.
Yeah.
Geldor and Beau, man, they're down to fucking party.
His big axe that looks like it's actually one of the things they take pizzas out of the brick oven with.
It is one of the things they serve pizzas on. He serves pizzas with it. That's what he does.
Like stuff like that, man. That this line has brought me.
Well, that is
so much delight.
The true beauty and the what makes classics. And you as a wider toy collector, you have a better answer to this than I do. But is there another toy line that has completely embraced an entire legacy of a property in the way that Masters of the Universe Classics has done by embracing the vintage figures, the mini comics, the new adventures of He-Man, She-Ra, like they're all these incredibly different releasing concept characters that never that came out of the archives of Mattel that never saw the light of day and then were given figures. The movie figures, is there another toy line that has brought all of these other iterations of this property together cohesively into one same, scale?
There is no toy line that has cared as much about the history of where it came from. However, I do want to mention some lines that I feel have taken inspiration from the Classics line, which is very important to the conversation, because if one day you and I are gonna do a show where we look back at the toy lines that have existed during our lifetimes, and we're gonna look at Masters of the Universe Classics and how important it was to what happened in the toy industry. And I believe without the Classics line, we would not have seen all of the Superpowers figures that we saw in the DC Universe Classics line. Which, granted, Scott Knightlick was over that as well. But we got to see El Dorado and Apache Chief and Black Lightning and a lot of really interesting DC characters that would never have seen the light of day without Scott Knightlick's direction. But then you go over to an entirely different company and you go with the NECA Real Toys Alien and Predator lines, and you see that it's the modern Alien and Predator lines with all the articulation and sculpt, and these are gorgeous figures, but they're also doing reproductions of the 90s Alien vs. Predator figures, which is a very Classics thing to do because they're incorporating wacky bullshit like Lava Planet Predator, but they're doing him in this modern way. And I honestly feel that if it wasn't for the Masters of the Universe Classics line, that NECA would never have said, oh, we can take these old, weird designs and do them in a modern way and incorporate it into the current line. As a matter of fact, I would go so far as to say there's a new wave of Marvel Legends from Hasbro that are using the... do you remember the Toy Biz Marvel figures from the early 90s? That it was like really basic shit like Spider-Man and Wolverine and Punisher.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
They were like super basic figures. They had maybe 9 or 10 points of articulation. They were about 5 inches tall. And Toy Biz was just like...
Yeah, you wanted a Spider-Man.
Yes.
There was a Spider-Man.
He's got suction cups on his hands. Yeah. Look at him.
Right.
Well, Hasbro now has done a whole wave of retro figures based on those Toy Biz figures. They have the same packaging. They're on blister cards rather than boxes like the rest of the Marvel Legends are. And they're totally based in the nostalgia that Classics banked on.
But once again... That's just like what you said, NECA, that's saying we're going to make toys based on toys.
Yes.
What Classics did was we're going to take New Adventures, we're going to take the mini comics, we're going to take every single iteration, and maybe it's just that He-Man had more iterations, that it had comics and it had a movie and it had all these other disparate things that weren't the vintage line, character-wise.
Right.
And to bring them all together cohesively into one. And then, on top of that, to go the distance and give them all bios.
Well,
that somehow tried to tie 30 fucking years, of
4 different continuities
together into one cohesive, not just visual cohesiveness of, okay, all these figures are at the same scale, but story.
Nothing.
Has anything ever come
no?
Because the other big lines, that could theoretically do that had comics. I mean, you got Transformers, you got G.I. Joe, you've got these things that had TV shows, that had toys, that had comics. I think the mini comics are pretty unique to He-Man, but I don't think there's any property that had
nothing
the breadth.
Nothing has done it as successfully as the Classics line.
But is that because they didn't have the source material?
Well, no, I think NECA has come the closest because if you look at their Alien and Predator lines, they've got comics, they've got toy lines, and they've got movies, and they have adapted characters from all of those things into the same style within a single line. But I don't know that they would have done it if they hadn't witnessed the success of the Classics line.
And I think that's what Super 7's doing.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
What Super 7 is doing is the thing the thing that Alien and Predator don't have is that when those movies originally came out, they didn't have toys.
Right.
Right? The toys only came later for some reason. Or basically because they were fucking horror movies. Then you had the aborted
Alien line in the 70s, and then you had Kenner's Alien versus Predator line in the 90s. But yes, when those franchises were at their peak, they did not have toy lines like Mass did. But I will say this: you also have Kenner/Hasbro's Star Wars line that has incorporated comics, toys, movies, TV shows, cartoons, everything into a cohesive line. But unfortunately, that 3.75-inch scale, they've kind of abandoned at this point.
Well, that's what Super 7 is doing. I mean, I think that the Super 7 is going, what if Alien toys had come out right when the movies came out.
Well, that's what the reaction line originally was. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, but it's reaction, it's muscle, it's right. You know, like it's the big alien. Yes. They're doing the big aliens, you know, and I think that's they're sort of like it's the missing link.
But there is
they're sort of rewriting history
to go directly to your point though, there is no toy line that has successfully incorporated not only as a toy line but as a narrative.
Yeah.
Successfully incorporated all of its elements together. Because here's the thing, Star Wars, to a certain extent, even prior to the Disney buyout, there was some continuity. To a certain extent, Aliens and Predator, through Dark Horse Comics, through Fox Studios, had a certain amount of continuity. Whereas Mattel, with all the different iterations of Masters of the Universe, they never really gave a shit about that continuity, but you had Scott Knightley come in and say, I'm going to make all of this work not only as a story or as a toy line that shares aesthetics and scale, but as a story.
Yeah.
Nothing has ever done that.
Thank you, Scott Knightley, wherever you are.
Yes.
Now, and I completely appreciate your choice to get the fuck out of the spotlight and raise your family and
Here's the thing, though. He got the fuck out of the spotlight, but he went to Jax and created a whole new incredible toy line.
I actually have no idea what he's been doing since he left Team M. What's going on?
He went to Jax Pacific and created the Big Figs toy line, which is amazing.
What is that? What is Big Figs?
He's the one responsible for when you go to Target or Walmart and you see the 18 to 24 inch Star Wars or DC Comics figures. He's responsible for those. Huh. And they started out as being these really
the 5-point articulation?
5 points articulation,
right.
The larger scale figures.
Super skinny, really they fit in the super slender box.
Well, no, not the 12-inch ones. The ones that are in a cardboard tray.
Okay.
The figures that are if you hold up a ruler, they're 6 inches to 12 inches taller than a ruler.
Okay.
That started out looking basically like gigantic versions of the old Kenner Star Wars figures. But over time, they've evolved in sculpt and paint because people have been buying the shit out of them because they have a lower price point because he figured out a way to produce them for a lower cost. Mm. And essentially these things have taken the toy world by fucking storm.
Because please edit. Sorry.
Nope. I will. I'm going to make a
time note. Yeah. Sorry. Because Little B, he's got a Vader and a Stormtrooper that he loves that I think are at the scale we're talking about.
Yeah.
They're great. And I want to get him. I was seeing some of the other ones that are like Ant-Man and Black Panther and some more of the obscure, not obscure now, but less, not Captain America, not Iron Man type guys. That those figures are, he digs them. I can see that those are the reason that those are selling. And
they're connecting, yes.
Yeah.
And that's Scott Knightley, is he went to Jax Pacific and he said, if we can make a larger scale figure, then we can get all of these licenses that are so focused on the 3.75 inch or 6 inch figure scale, and we can make simpler articulation designs, but gigantic.
They're dolls. Is what they are. They're dolls. They're dolls. They're Barbie size. Sort of,
or even bigger than that. But
they're bigger than Barbie. But they are.
They're going to take up the same amount of shelf space in the toy store, but they're going to be bigger and they're going to catch the eye, and people are going to like them. And he was right. Yeah. And I've got Captain Phasma, I've got Boba Fett, I've got a Chewbacca that Scott Knightley, is responsible for.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew that he would succeed with whatever he did. I just figured he would sort of like fly under the radar and
no, he went. I would honestly say that his big figs at Jack's are an even bigger success than Masters of the Universe Classics because
they're definitely a more mainstream success.
Yes,
I mean,
they're making it to mass market, and they have been so successful that they're still around 5 to 6 years after they started showing up. And the like the big gigantic 4 foot tall figures like Batman that you see in Toys R Us or whatever, that's all him, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Good for him, man.
Yeah.
He deserves. I hope he's fucking rolling in it.
I think he is.
He deserves the shit out of it. And anyone who wants to fucking badmouth Skyline to me can fucking suck it because I there is no way to have been in the spotlight position that he was in for years and years and years and years and not taken just an extraordinary amount of shit just by being the face of a brand, know, and
I don't know where you can find it now, but at one point, he was posting online the story of how Masters of the Universe Classics came about.
Yeah, he had a blog kind of thing going on.
And if you read that, there's no way you can't absolutely fall in love with him.
Yeah, anyone who still has, and even people who had the beef back then, if you love He-Man, every single thing about classics that is beautiful and amazing and even fucking happened in the first place is because of that guy.
Absolutely.
And he took such a phenomenal amount of shit by being the face of that brand that I wish him all of the success in the world for being somebody who was passionate about something and had and I totally relate to this by being somebody who was passionate about something and had the fucking knowledge.
Yes.
To do it and do it professionally.
Well, the knowledge, and the drive.
Right.
Because his drive, when you go back and look at him saying things
he fought Mattel. He dragged Mattel kicking and screaming to make the toys that I have on my shelf happen.
When you all right, for the listener, you clock out at 5 o'clock. Let's just make an across the board assumption. You clock out at 5 o'clock. Scott Knight clocked out at 5 o'clock. But he stayed in the office, and he went and he raided the archives of Mattel to find resources and materials and stories and all the things that the people that created the original Masters line committed to files. He's digging through file cabinets. He's looking through fucking microfiche. And in his own personal off time, because he loves this line so much, he's pulling all of these files, he's writing new stories, he's creating new ideas, and he's going home 5 hours after all the rest of us clocked out.
Yeah.
Because he loves it. So
and there's a very and this is something that I do at work. There's something when you deal in nostalgia. When your bread and butter is nostalgia and you're dealing with geeks, you can't get it wrong.
Right.
Because geeks can smell that fucking shit a mile away. And you have to be completely 100% informed and on top of shit and connect the dots to make it work. Like doing the Labyrinth Ball and selling a ticket package for 2 tickets that starts at $1,000 on auction. If you don't know Labyrinth and how to create that experience and what that means if somebody spends that kind of money on that and you fuck it up and you like don't know what you're talking about, you can't do that.
Right.
You have to have somebody who knows a property completely intimately, and you have to know it inside and out.
Real
You
recognizes real.
Right.
And any criticism that we may have ever had about Scott Knightlick, and I won't speak for you, but for me, I certainly complained about the classics line more than my fair share of times. But,
I had my complaints, but at the end of the day,
it was any issues were because of Mattel. They weren't because of Scott Knightlick.
No. He, and even if it was on him, he still had the best interest of the fans and the property in his mind.
Absolutely.
And in his heart. And if there was a problem with it, what he did vastly outweighs any missteps that he may have made.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm not going to say he's completely innocent because there are things that maybe weren't great. But those were either put on him by Mattel, or those were his mistakes that he made by being somebody who makes big decisions.
Right.
And I am completely 100% willing to let all of that go.
And what's funny
for the good that he did
is in 2018, if there was an announcement of Scott Knightlick is coming back to work with Super 7 to run the Masters of the Universe Classics line, I would be like, fuck yes.
Yeah. I would have
no
honestly,
problem with
I'd
that.
be like, no, dude, you keep doing what you're doing and make more money than you're making more money right now than you could ever make at Super 7.
Yes, you're right. You're right.
Like, hey, that's great for me and the fans, but you shouldn't do that.
Well, if he was like,
as
look,
a person.
if he was like, look, I'm sitting on my big fig money, we're good to go.
Sure.
I'm going to come back and just help
come back
out.
and do my retirement passion project.
Yes.
Yeah. Then I'd be completely on board. But I know for a fact that Super 7 could not pay him what he's probably making over it. Yeah.
No shit. So to wrap this thing up, if you had, let's say you're talking to somebody who is a toy collector, but who maybe has never gotten into Masters of the Universe or who doesn't quite get it, what would be your pitch? What would be your what would be your one figure? And I hate to put you on the spot with this because this may be something that requires more thought than I'm allowing you. If you had to point to one figure from the entire history of Masters of the Universe to say to a toy collector, this is the figure that you have to have if you're going to call yourself a toy collector, what would it be?
Well, that is putting me on the spot.
I know it is. I'll tell you what.
Well, no, I want to answer it because I won't. I don't have the real estate to think about it later and come back. So, if you are a toy collector, and maybe you're not a big Masters of the Universe fan, I would say the Ultimates, that's if you just want to like represent He-Man, then I think picking up the Ultimate He-Man and Ultimate Skeletor would be accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I would probably say that one of my favorite pieces as a toy collector out of the entire line is still the Battle Ram.
The Classics Battle Ram?
The Classics Battle Ram, I think, is perfection. If you were going to do, like, if I was to pick maybe a piece, and that's personal, and maybe that's too personal, because that to me was like the Holy Grail. It was the thing that when I hung out with other kids at their houses they had that I never did. So that stinks of my personal experience. So toy wise, I would still say out of the entire vintage line, Ram Man is still one of my favorite figures. If I had to pick a figure, because he just breaks the mold of the reuse parts thing, and is at 100% new tooled figure. He's perfect. If I were to pick maybe a classics character, he's one of the original 8, vintage character, toy wise. That Ram Man figure is, and there's something about just picking him up and holding him in your hand that the weight of him feels real. But if I had to say everything He-Man of all time,
it's tough. Because what the heck is representative
as a collector
of such a diverse line?
There's so much there, and it's so bad. I mean,
I'll tell you what.
I'm staring at my classics.
So am I.
And
I know mine. I'll tell you mine. Let me tell you my 2, because I have 2 different, depending on what we're trying to accomplish. I have 2 different choices. One, feel like, and this is weird for me because I'm the guy who was like, I don't give a shit about these human characters, but as a toy collector, if you're trying to represent a full toy collection of the history of toys, I think you have to have an original He-Man. Or or a Battle Armor He-Man. Because Battle Armor He-Man was, to me, the second cycle of that line, where you still had He-Man, the blonde, attractive, muscular, big, strong representative of the line, but we've given him this gimmick, and I love gimmicks when they're done well.
I love I love the Battle Armor stuff.
The Battle Armor stuff is one of the best gimmicks in the history of toys. So actually, you know what? I'm gonna say Battle Armor He-Man is my first pick, the original Battle Armor He-Man.
I can totally get behind that.
If you're a toy collector and you're trying to represent the history of toys. But if you're a toy collector and you're talking about the thing that's going to hook you, the thing that's going to make you go, fuck, I have to have more of this, I'm going to go with the Classics Trapjaw. Because Classics Trapjaw has... He's got, all of the features of a general classics figure. He's got the great articulation, really posable, lots of cool sculpted parts, the articulated jaw. He's got the loop on his head.
2 different arms,
yes.
He's got
the different attachments for his arm. Like, he's one of the most feature-heavy figures of the classics line. And I feel like any toy collector worth a shit would get that Classics Trapjaw and be like, oh, I get this line now.
I would put Roboto up there, too.
I would, too.
And Roboto has the addition of the working gears and stuff inside. He's got everything basically the Trapjaw does. And the transparent body and the working gears and shit inside. There's so much going on in that figure. For the same reasons that you cite Trapjaw, I would say Roboto is like Trapjaw plus like 10.
Yeah. You're not wrong, but for me personally, Roboto's not as appealing as Trapjaw. But
he's not. No, he's not.
But you're right.
He does all the gimmicks and,
you're right.
and extra.
Yes. Yes.
But I think I figured it out. I think that conversation helped me figure it out, and I think that my answer would be vintage Many Faces.
Oh, nice.
Because he has all the bulk, the muscliness of He-Man.
Right.
His action feature is completely unique at the time.
And it works 100% of the time.
Yes.
He doesn't wear out like Ram Man does.
Yep. Yeah, most Ram Mans are broken.
Right.
And it's a great example of a wonderful action feature. And it has the sort of techno. It has it sort of hits all the buttons, right?
Yes,
like
it's fantasy and science fiction.
It's got the monster, it's got the human with the muscles, and it's got the robot. I mean, it checks all of the He-Man boxes.
Oh
right?
Man, that's a good call.
I think it's that, and it's funny because the holiday for He-Man is there's a California holiday that's He-Man Day. But then the only other He-Man holiday is Bring Your Many Faces to Work Day.
What? I didn't even know that.
You didn't know about that? Yeah,
No.
there's a Bring Your Many Faces to Work Day, and everybody posts pictures of Many Faces on their desk. So my loyal subject's Many Faces lives on my desk at work, next to my Battle Cat, next to my super adorable Battle Cat. And I would say that vintage Many Faces represents everything that makes He-Man interesting and good, both thematically, narratively, and with the action features of the toy.
Man,
and I wash my hands.
Oh no, you got it. That's great.
I did it. I think I did it. Yep.
That's great, man. All right. I think we're good. What do you think?
I feel pretty good. I think that there was a part that I kind of wanted to go back to talk about 2002 getting me back into toy hunting and like the driving all over town.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Something and it was because I had not been into toys and
right.
it got me into being a part of an online community. I was part of the online community. We threw a party. We threw a party at my apartment for local Masters of the Universe fans.
Holy shit, really?
4 people showed up. But 4 people showed up.
At that
point, we did it. Like we actually engaged the community, and
by the time that line hit, I was already, and I actually kind of miss these days, but I was already into having on payday from my job, or jobs as it were, I would drive around to all the local Targets and Walmarts and Toys R Us. I think Lionel Play World was already dead by that time.
Lionel. Oh, yeah.
But back then in the early 2000s, we also had all the independent toys. Like if you're local to Georgia, there was TNT Toys. There you could go to dirt malls and find toy stores. I would spend entire days on my payday just driving all over the metro Atlanta area looking for new toys. And
that was a very different experience from getting involved in classics, where they just fucking showed up at your house.
Yes.
And I was not a toy collector before 2002. And the new show and the new toy line sparked that inside of me, and it was fun. The hunt was fun, and while I love the subscription and I love just having toys to show up at my house, I hadn't been part of that toy hunting experience and community until He-Man again. He-Man
nice.
Back. I wasn't driving around town looking for Star Wars figures. I wasn't driving around town looking for G.I. Joes or Transformers. That was an experience. And then, I was dating Sarah at the time, and we did it together as a couple, and that was really special and fun. And and it was a bonding experience for us. I remember the Snake Men figures coming in only at Aldi, like going to a grocery store, which was the only place to buy.
Oh, I don't even know about that.
Of figures. You didn't, the Aldi shit, man. It was crazy. I didn't even know what an Aldi's was.
No, I didn't know what an Aldi's was until like 4 years ago.
No, man, I drove way fucking far, and the whole Snake Man wave ended up at Aldi's for some reason, and it was towards the end, and I remember going to Aldi's and God, this sucked. I went and I drove all over town, and I got like Snake Warrior Fisto. It was like the snake. The Fisto repaint.
Oh wow!
For the snake wave, and I took it over to my at then time best friend's house, and I am no longer. This is very telling, but I am no longer best friends with this person, and they're not in my life anymore. And I went over to his place, and I had my haul, and we were opening him up, and he promptly broke him. Like 10 minutes of him being open.
No.
Because that's the kind of guy he was.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
But that was part of it. And then classics happened, and then it wasn't a hunt. It was just it was a matter of like being on the internet at the right time of day and getting your. And
that's such a statement on toys in general today. Because there's so much that you have to look at, or for somebody who collects a wide range of things, you look at it and you're like, all right, if I really want this figure, I need to go ahead and pre-order it from Big Bad Toy Store or Dorkside Toys or whatever, because I don't want to take a chance that I'm not going to be able to find it in stores. Because there's a new line of DC Multiverse has replaced DC Universe Classics. Mm-hmm. And their distribution, if it's not a movie line like Wonder Woman or Justice League, it's very questionable as to whether you're going to be able to find it at retail. And there's a new wave of DC Multiverse figures that has Batwoman, and the Build-A-Figure is this new Clayface that looks amazing and is based directly off of Clayface as he currently is in Detective Comics, which is one of my favorite comics right now.
Right.
So if I want that wave, I kind of have to go and look at like, shit, Big Bad Toy Store is offering a pre-order right now for the whole wave, and I don't know if I'll ever even see it at Walmart or Toys R Us. So I have to fucking order it, which... I do it because I want those figures, but it bums me out because I miss the hunt.
Yeah. And I haven't been on the hunt, like other than loyal subjects, but even then you're just looking for the boxes. You're not even like, you're not rifling through the peg.
You're just hoping to find them somewhere. It's not
You're hoping to find them. The brand is there.
Right.
That's all you're hoping for. I still haven't had the moment of finding the. I was secretly hoping that, not secretly, but hoping that I would come across the Mega Constructs guys.
Right.
And I never did, because I think they were exclusive to Walmart.
They're a Walmart exclusive.
Yeah,
to my knowledge, they're Walmart exclusive, and Walmart has specific displays. Like if you go to their toy section, they have about a 4-foot section that's just the Mega Block stuff.
Yeah, and I never, in the handful of times I've been in a Walmart, which is not many, I never saw them. Yeah. So, but there was always that sort of secret, like, I'm going to pop off, to the toy section just in case, and it never, I never lucked out, but it was a different experience, but it was 2000X. It was the cartoon. It was the perfect storm of the cartoon and the toys that got me back into toys at all.
Right.
And now I was very happy following classics. I listened to the podcasts, and it was the only real sort of like online community other than puppetry that I was engaged in. I didn't listen to podcasts that weren't about He-Man. It was my fandom, and it is my fandom, and I'm still proud that He-Man is my fandom. There's never a part of me that regrets loving He-Man.
Right.
Because I think that it's positive. I think that it's beautiful. I think that it embraces diversity across every board. It's just fucking rad. And of all the things that I could have picked to be my one thing, I still have no regrets about being He-Man at all.
Mr. Beau Brown, I think that's a beautiful way to close out this episode.
Thank you.
I hope that a year from now we are back talking about the differences in Super 7's Masters of the Universe line. I hope that we have plenty to discuss, but I am glad that in 2018 we have taken a look back at the entirety of the Masters of the Universe Classics line. Well, Masters of the Universe in general.
In general.
Yeah, everything. And kind of laid it down, man.
Yeah. Laying it down.
Absolutely. All right, you gotta sign out. You gotta give it. You gotta do it.
Well, thank you all for listening. I appreciate you taking the time, and I wish you all good journey.
Yes. Hey guys, you like that interstitial music that is after the intro of every show, right? Well, then you want to visit themysterymenofsurf.com or Mystery Men Surf at Facebook, or facebook.com/mysterymensurf, and check out the guys that provide that music because they're great. They play around Atlanta. They've actually played all over the country, but check out themysterymenofsurf.com. Find their music, find out where they're going to be playing. I love those guys. They're weird, and they're from outer space, but they're really good. And I'm old friends with their drummer. He's one of the best. He might be related in some way to somebody that works for Needless Things, but that's neither here nor there. We don't need to discuss that. What we do need to discuss is that there's going to be a lot of content coming out soon. We're going to have a live toy panel from Days of the Dead Atlanta, which, by the way, is happening now. There's still time for you to go. There's still time for you to get your passes and see the Dirty Con Game Show special horror edition at 10 p.m. tonight. That's Friday, February the 2nd. And there's obviously still plenty of time for you to get in and see the Toy Stories horror panel, all about horror toys, at 4 p.m. Saturday, February the 3rd. And if you don't make it, I understand. Look, the Needless Things live 200th episode is one of the biggest things I've ever done in my life. But, I get it if you didn't make it. It's okay. It's okay. Because you listen to the show, you spread the word, you share it, right? Right? You share it. I love you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Needless Things podcast. You're the best. You can find the show on iTunes, Stitcher, Downcast, or in the ears of a Trader Vic's employee. Love you. Mean it. Uh-huh.